The garage door was open. That's when I knew my late husband's Ferrari was gone. 20 years of his life, gone overnight. My son sold it, to take his wife to Berlin. He didn't even look ashamed, just said, "Mom, it was just sitting there. Clara wanted this trip. You wouldn't understand." Clara, my daughter-in-law, always perfect, always in control. And now she owned the silence between us. I stood there staring at the empty space on the concrete floor, the oil stain where the car had slept every night for decades. Robert built that Ferrari with his own hands. He said it wasn't a car, it was a promise that love could last longer than time. And now, my son had sold it for a vacation. But the next morning, the phone rang. A man's voice said, "Mrs. Morgan, this is Tom Graves from Graves Auto Gallery. I have your husband's Ferrari." I couldn't speak. He continued quieter. "There's something inside it. Something your husband left for you before he died." My name is Adele Morgan, and this is how my late husband saved my life and taught my son and his wife a lesson they will never forget. Before we continue, please tell me where you're watching from and subscribe to Grandma Life Stories, where we believe our best chapters can still begin at any age. Now, back to the story. The garage door was open. That's what I noticed first. The next morning I made coffee. The garage door was open. That was the first thing I noticed. Through the window above the sink, I could see the dark space where Robert's Ferrari should have been. He never left that door open. Not once in 43 years. I stood there, mug in hand, staring through the glass. The air inside the house felt heavier somehow. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick slower, as if it too was holding its breath. I took a sip. The coffee was cold. Had I been standing there that long? Maybe time had stopped, somewhere between what was gone and what I couldn't yet face. "He never left that door open," I whispered. The sound of my voice startled me. I set the cup down. The ceramic hit the counter, sharp and final. Then I unlocked the back door. Cold air rushed in, smelling of rain and salt. It cut right through the robe on my shoulders, through the numbness settling in my chest. Robert should have been out there by now, polishing that car, humming old Springsteen songs under his breath. But there was only wind. And silence. So deep it almost had a sound. It sounded like absence. I stepped out the back door. The grass was wet, heavy with dew. It clung to my slippers and numbed my toes. The air smelled faintly of salt and iron, warm for April. The kind of morning Robert loved. He would have been out here already, polishing that Ferrari until the chrome caught the sun. I crossed the yard slowly. Every step pressed into the soil, soft and cold. Each blade of grass bent, then stood up again, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. The garage stood a few yards away, door half open. A thin line of light cut across the floor like a blade. Dust floated through it, slow and aimless. I could still smell him, engine oil and orange soap. That was Robert. That was home. My hand found the door frame. The paint was cracked, the wood dry. A splinter caught my skin, sharp, almost welcome. I froze, not from fear, but from memory pressing down on me like a hand on my shoulder. "He was always out here," I whispered. "Every morning, every single one." I took a breath, then pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, and the silence inside moved. The light stretched across the concrete like a blade. The garage felt bigger without the car. Too big, too hollow. I stepped inside, careful not to disturb the dust. Even silence had a shape here. Robert's workbench stood against the far wall. Every tool had its place, each one marked by a thin black outline, like shadows that refused to fade. He used to say, "Order made chaos bearable." Now even the order looked abandoned. The smell still lingered. Engine oil, soap, metal, him. I could almost hear the soft click of his wrench, the small sigh he made when he finally wiped his hands clean. Then I saw it. In the middle of the floor, a dark stain. The shape of the car, faint but permanent, as if the ground itself had learned the weight of what once lived there. I knelt down slowly, my knees pressing into the cold. When my fingers touched the mark, the texture bit back, dry, rough, almost sticky. It left a trace on my skin, black and glimmering in the light. 20 years, I whispered. Same spot. You'd think a car could leave an echo. The words trembled into the still air. I lifted my hand, staring at the smear on my fingertips. It looked like ash, and for a moment I thought I could feel his heartbeat beneath it. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust from my knees. The smell of oil clung to my hands. Beside the workbench, tucked under a folded rag, I saw it. A small leather journal, corners soft, spine cracked, pages curled with time. I picked it up, turning it over in my palms. The cover was warm from the sunlight slipping through the window. It felt like something still alive. When I opened it, the sound of paper filled the air, soft, steady, like breathing. His handwriting covered every page, neat, deliberate, angled slightly to the right. Numbers, sketches, notes about the car. He wrote as if the act itself could keep him here. I turned each page slowly, afraid the words might crumble. Smudges of graphite, oil stains, tiny traces of him pressed into the paper. And then, on the last page, his final line. Almost done. Next summer, I'll teach Adele to drive her. I froze. The world went quiet. For a second, I could almost hear him, his soft laugh, his hand tapping the hood in pride. He was going to teach me to drive her, I whispered. Next summer. The words trembled, but didn't break. I closed the journal gently, pressing it to my chest, as if I could keep his heartbeat inside. The silence grew heavy, but somewhere beneath it, something else stirred. Not grief, but purpose. The sound reached me before the sight did. A low hum, steady, growing louder with every second. I turned toward the driveway. A white BMW curved around the corner, tires whispering against the gravel. It moved too smoothly, too cleanly for a house that hadn't known joy in months. The car stopped. The engine idled for a moment, then died. Silence folded back in, heavier now. Jason stepped out first. Hands in his pockets, shoulders tense, eyes fixed anywhere but me. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a boy rehearsing confidence he didn't feel. Then came Clara, designer sunglasses, silk blouse, perfectly still. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just stood there beside him, her perfume cutting through the smell of oil and dust. For a second no one spoke. Even the wind outside the garage seemed to hold its breath. I took one step forward, my voice calm but sharp. "Jason, where's the car?" He blinked, eyes flicking toward the ground. "Mom, I was going to tell you. When?" He didn't answer. Clara slid her glasses higher and looked straight at me. Her reflection caught the empty garage behind me. Nothing but shadows and that dark stain on the floor. That was when I realized something. They hadn't just sold the car. They'd sold what was left of him. Jason wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders rose and fell once, like he was rehearsing what came next. Then he said it. "I sold it." The words landed like a door slamming shut. For a second, I couldn't breathe. "You what?" He swallowed hard. "Clara's been planning this Berlin trip for months. She said it was time we did something for ourselves." The sound in my ears changed, sharp, metallic, like air being cut in half. I took one slow step toward him. His gaze dropped to the ground. "That was your father's car," I said quietly. He nodded, just once. "He's gone, Mom. You don't even drive." The air thickened between us, heavy and still. Every word he spoke felt borrowed, like something Clara had written for him. I kept my voice steady. That car wasn't about driving. It was about what built us. Jason looked up then, eyes glassy with something that wasn't guilt, just confusion. "She said it was best. We could use the money." Money. 20 years of oil and rust and patience, reduced to money. I took another step, close enough to see the tremor in his jaw. "You sold your father's soul for a vacation." His mouth opened, then closed again. No defense came, only silence. Clara turned her head slightly, the corner of her mouth curling, not in shame, but satisfaction. Jason looked at her, then back at me, torn between the two worlds he'd created. I stood still, hands at my sides, heartbeat steady now. There was nothing left to ask, only what came next. Jason started talking fast, words spilling out before I could even blink. "Mom, it wasn't just about the trip. Clara's been building connections in Berlin, people who can help her expand her business. She said this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We needed to move quickly. The car was just sitting there. You don't even drive anymore, it made sense." I didn't say a word. He kept going, desperate to fill the silence. "She told me how much that car was costing us. The insurance, the maintenance, the space. It was just collecting dust. You always said you didn't want to live surrounded by the past. I thought selling it might help." His voice cracked a little at the end. I still didn't move. The garage air felt colder, tighter. When he finally stopped talking, I asked one question. "For how much?" He hesitated, looked away. 15,000. The number fell between us like an insult. 15,000, I repeated softly. For 20 years of his life. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Behind him, Clara turned toward the car window, pretending to check her reflection. I saw her smirk there, just a flicker, and it told me everything I needed to know. Robert's hands had built that car bolt by bolt. Now, their son had sold it for the price of a luxury handbag. The coffee in my stomach turned bitter. I smiled, not kindly, but to keep from breaking. 15,000, I whispered again. That's what love's worth now. Clara finally stepped forward, heels clicking against the driveway like a metronome. "Carol," she said smoothly, "we're not discussing this. The sale is done." I looked up, meeting her reflection through those mirrored sunglasses. "It's Adele," I said quietly, "and it was never yours to sell." She tilted her head, lips curving into something that might have been a smile. "Oh, please. The car was wasting away in that old garage. It's better off in Berlin, somewhere people actually appreciate art." Her tone dripped with condescension, every word polished, rehearsed. Jason tried to interrupt, but Clara raised a manicured hand, silencing him. "We leave tomorrow," she continued, "and Berlin isn't going to wait." For a moment, I just looked at her. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of her perfume, sweet, expensive, and hollow. "Surely you understand," she added, eyes hidden behind glass. "The car was just sitting there." "So was your conscience," I said. Her mouth froze mid-smile. The words hung between us, sharp as glass. Behind her lenses, I knew she was glaring, calculating the next move. Jason stepped forward, nervous, trying to ease the tension. "Mom, let's just not do this right now." But Clara wasn't done. She leaned closer, her voice lower, colder. "You've had your time, Adele. Maybe it's time to let go of the past. People get stuck in their grief. It's not healthy." I didn't blink. "Grief isn't unhealthy, Clara. Manipulation is." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't reply. Jason's hand brushed her arm gently, a quiet plea. "Let's go," he murmured. Clara hesitated, still holding my gaze for a second too long. Then she turned, the glass of her sunglasses catching the morning light, bright, blinding, empty. Jason followed, shoulders bowed, steps uneven. The white BMW backed out of the driveway, its tires hissing over gravel. I stood there until the sound faded, until only the wind remained. And when it did, I realized silence was the only thing I still owned. The sound of their engine faded down the hill until there was nothing left but the hum of my own breath. Inside the kitchen, the light had changed. It looked harder, sharper, like it could cut through anything soft. The coffee cup still sat on the counter, half full, cold as stone. I reached for it without thinking. My hand shook. The porcelain clinked against the saucer, a small, fragile sound that filled the room more than their voices ever could. I lifted the cup, felt its weight. too light, too empty. For a moment I wanted to throw it, to hear something break, to let the crash speak for me. But I didn't. My hand hovered in this air, trembling, then lowered slowly. The cup met the counter again, gentle, controlled. I stared at it, at the thin ring of brown along the rim, the faint trace of my lipstick, the only mark that was still mine. 43 years in a hospital had taught me something. Don't shake when you bleed. You steady the hand, you clean the wound, you keep breathing. That's how you survive what hurts. I leaned against the counter, eyes closed. The silence grew heavier, almost physical. Outside, a gull cried over the bay, and for the first time that morning, I realized my heartbeat had slowed. The anger was still there, coiled tight, but it was quieter now, waiting for its turn. The white BMW rolled down the gravel path, its wheels throwing up a thin cloud of dust that hung in the sunlight like smoke. I watched it go from the doorway, hands resting against the frame. Clara's sunglasses flashed once in the mirror before the car turned the corner and disappeared. Then there was only the soft hiss of the wind. The yard looked smaller without them. The grass bent where their tires had passed, dark tracks cutting across the green. Dust swirled, then settled on my slippers, on the hem of my robe, on everything they hadn't taken. I stepped outside, the air sharp against my skin. The driveway shimmered under the sun, but the garage behind me stayed dim, its emptiness still breathing. They drove away, I whispered, with everything they didn't earn. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Some truths don't travel far. I turned back toward the house. The coffee on the counter was cold again. Through the kitchen window, the sunlight stretched across the oil stain on the floor, turning it gold for a moment, like the ground was trying to forgive what it had lost. I stood there until the light shifted, until it became just a stain again. Then I locked the door. The house was silent again, the kind of silence that hums, thick and alive. I stood by the door, keys cold in my hand. The air still carried the echo of their car fading into distance. Step by step, I walked back toward the garage. The floor creaked beneath me, each sound small but deliberate. The air inside still smelled of oil and rain. I looked around, at the empty space, at the bench that hadn't been touched since Robert's hands last brushed it. Then I reached for the lock. The key turned with a slow, final click. It was the same lock he had installed, old brass, worn from years of use. When it clicked shut, something inside me did too. I turned toward the table where the phone sat. The screen glowed faintly. I picked it up and scrolled through the contacts until the number for the local police appeared. My thumb hovered over the green call icon. It would have been simple. File a report, say the car was stolen, let someone else clean the mess. But then I looked at the stain on the floor. The sunlight hit it just right. Soft, gold, almost holy. I lowered the phone slowly. "No," I whispered. "Not yet." I placed it gently back on the table. Robert used to say that justice wasn't about noise, it was about precision. He didn't shout when things broke. He fixed them, quietly, perfectly. I straightened the papers on the counter, wiped the cup clean, and took one long breath. "Some lessons," I murmured. "You don't call in, you earn them." Outside, the wind picked up. It sounded almost like an engine turning over, steady, waiting. It took me 3 days to find the courage. When I finally did, the house felt colder than usual, as if it knew what was coming. I sat at the kitchen table, the old landline phone beside me. The cord curled like a sleeping snake. I dialed the number Tom Graves had given me. Each ring sounded longer than the last. Then a man answered. Steady voice, faint accent. "Graves Auto Gallery. Victor Hall speaking." "Mr. Hall," I said, steadying my breath. "This is Adele Morgan. You called about my husband's Ferrari." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the faint ticking of a clock behind him. "Yes, ma'am," he said at last. "I remember. The paperwork isn't signed yet. I froze. Not signed? No, ma'am. Your son sent the documents, but the transfer isn't finalized. Something was missing. My heart quickened. You said my husband left something inside. What did you mean? Another pause, the sound of papers shifting. Then, softly, You'll have to see it yourself, Mrs. Morgan. I gripped the receiver tighter. Where are you located? Berlin, ma'am. Graves Auto Gallery on Lindenstrasse. I'll be expecting you. The line clicked. I sat there, the dial tone humming in my ear, eyes fixed on nothing. The morning came cold and silver. Mist rolled in from the bay, curling around the fence posts and settling on the glass. I stood by the door with my coat buttoned to the neck, keys in hand. It had been months since I'd gone farther than the grocery store, not since the funeral. The air outside stung, sharp and alive. I locked the door, turned once to look at the house, then walked to the old sedan Robert had kept for errands. Its paint had dulled to the color of ash, but it started with one reluctant cough. The sound filled the quiet like a heartbeat I'd almost forgotten. He taught me to drive so I'd never depend on anyone again. He used to say, "Control the wheel, control the fear." The engine sputtered, then steadied. I eased onto the road, tires hissing over damp asphalt. The rain from last night left everything shining, streetlights, puddles, even the mailbox that still leaned a little to the left. Seattle mornings always had that half-lit glow, soft enough to remember and hard enough to move through. As I drove, the radio stayed off. Only the hum of the road kept me company. Each turn took me farther from grief and closer to suspicion. The city rose ahead, cold glass and quiet promise. I didn't know what I would find when I got there, but for the first time in months, I felt movement again, something alive inside the stillness. The sign read, Graves Auto Gallery, in tall silver letters that caught the gray morning light. Inside, the air smelled of polish and ozone, the kind of scent that belonged to money and memory scrubbed too clean. I pushed open the glass door. A small bell rang. Bright, polite. The floor gleamed like water. Rows of cars stood in silence, their curves reflecting every inch of light. This wasn't a garage. It was a cathedral for machines. Robert would have hated it. Too perfect. Too quiet. A man in a dark suit approached, his voice smooth. "Mrs. Morgan, Victor Hall." He extended a hand, professional, steady. I nodded, but didn't take it. He gestured toward the far corner. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I turned, and there it was. The Ferrari, red as blood under glass, untouched, waiting. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Every memory rushed back. The smell of oil, his laugh when the engine first started, the way sunlight slid across the hood like a living thing. My throat tightened. "It was never about beauty," I said quietly. Victor looked at me, surprised. "He rebuilt her bolt by bolt," I continued. "It was his second heartbeat." The reflection of the car stretched across the floor, wrapping around my shoes like a ghost reaching for home. And in that shine of red, I saw both of us, him and me, standing in two different lives, still connected by one promise of truth. Victor walked slowly toward the car, his shoes making no sound on the polished floor. He stopped by the rear bumper and looked at me before speaking. "We cleaned the car," he said quietly, "and found this." He lifted the trunk lid with careful hands. Inside, resting against the black carpet, was a small leather box, brown, scuffed, locked with a brass clasp that had dulled with time. He placed it on the work table nearby, the sound of it landing soft but heavy. A note was taped to the lid, the handwriting unmistakable, Robert's, neat and angled, for Adele, if she ever needs to know. My breath caught. I reached for the box, fingertips brushing the leather. It was warm, as if it had been waiting. "He knew I'd come," I said, the words almost breaking in my throat. Victor nodded once. He seemed prepared. The clasp clicked when I opened it. Inside lay a manila folder, corners worn, edges darkened with fingerprints. Beneath it, a faint scent of oil and cedar, his scent. I lifted the folder slowly, afraid the air might tear it. Documents, photos, his careful order in every page. He was still protecting me, I whispered, even from beyond. Victor looked away, giving me space. I pressed the box to my chest. It felt like a pulse, steady, certain, alive. Whatever was inside, it wasn't just evidence, it was intention. And for the first time, I realized Robert had never truly left. He'd simply moved his fight into my hands. I opened the folder carefully, the paper whispering against my fingers. Inside were photographs, 4 of them, glossy, recent. Each one told a story I hadn't been ready to hear. The first showed Clara standing in a bank lobby, sunlight slicing through tall windows. She was smiling, holding a folder, shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. The second photo, her sitting at a desk, signing papers. The third, an envelope, thick, being slid across the table toward her. The fourth, her walking away, that same smile, sharper now. Victor spoke softly behind me. He asked me to keep them safe. He said one day you'd understand. I stared at the photos, my heartbeat uneven. The date stamped on the corner froze me, 3 weeks before Robert died. She was there, I whispered, even then. The pictures slipped from my hand, scattering across the table. Each image caught the light differently, like pieces of a broken mirror. For a moment, I saw everything: his trust, her betrayal, the silence that had followed. My hand tightened on the edge of the last photo until it bent under my fingers. Grief gave way to something colder, sharper, not pain, purpose. The truth wasn't buried. It had just been waiting for me to open the box. The folder still smelled faintly of metal and dust. Under the photographs was a second envelope, heavier, sealed with tape yellowed by time. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled it open. Inside lay a single document, a stock certificate printed on thick ivory paper. The name at the top stopped me cold. Registered to Adele Morgan. Below it, in Robert's handwriting, a note. Protect this, not the car. I read it twice before I understood. He hadn't built that Ferrari to keep it safe. He'd built it to draw them out. The paper trembled between my fingers. I could see his foresight in every ink mark, the care of a man who knew betrayal long before it happened. He'd hidden our real security somewhere no one would look, in stocks for a small tech company I'd never heard of. The numbers beside it made my breath catch. $420,000, all untouched, all mine. I sat back, heart pounding with something new, not grief, not shock. Clarity. The car had been bait. The Ferrari was the test. He left the car, I whispered, to catch the thieves. The words echoed faintly in the showroom, swallowed by glass and silence. Robert hadn't trusted the world to protect me. He'd trusted me to finish what he started. Victor stood by a desk, adjusting his glasses. "There's one more thing," he said softly. "We managed to recover some security footage from the day your son brought the car in. You may not want to see this." He turned on a small monitor. The screen flickered to life, grainy but clear enough. Jason appeared first, smiling, shaking hands with Victor. Behind him, Clara lingered, her phone in hand, her eyes scanning the room. The timestamp glowed faintly at the bottom, the day after Robert's funeral. Jason leaned over the counter, signing forms with a confidence that wasn't his own. He laughed at something Clara whispered. Then she turned away, leaving him to finish the deal. Victor lowered the volume, stepping aside. "He seemed sure of what he was doing," he murmured. I leaned closer, my reflection ghosted across the screen. My voice barely rose above a whisper. He looked happy, selling what he never built. Victor's hand reached to shut the monitor off, but I stopped him. "Leave it," I said. "Let it play." The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. When the clip ended, I drew one slow breath and whispered, "Thank you." No tears, no trembling, just resolve, cold, clean, and complete. Victor stood beside the Ferrari, his reflection stretching across the red hood. The room had gone still, like even the air was listening. He folded his hands and said quietly, "Mrs. Morgan, if you move too soon, they'll hide everything. Money leaves traces, but people erase them fast when scared." I looked at him, my hand resting on the doorframe. He was right. Anger moved loud, and loud things broke before they hit their mark. Robert used to say the same thing, that justice wasn't about timing. It was about precision. Victor's gaze softened. "Do you want justice or noise?" For a moment, I didn't answer. I could still see Jason's face on that flickering screen, the smile that wasn't his. The ache that rose in me wasn't just grief anymore. It was direction. My fingers brushed the cool edge of the car, steadying myself. "Both," I said finally. He blinked. "Both?" "Yes," I murmured. "But in that order." The words settled like a promise. Victor nodded, slow and understanding. He reached for the box again, his voice almost a whisper. "Then you'll need to see one more thing." The light caught the brass clasp as he turned it. Somewhere outside, an engine revved in the distance, distant but familiar, like a warning, or maybe an invitation. Victor opened the box once more, his gloved fingers careful, deliberate. Under the folder's final sheet, something small gleamed, a black USB drive no bigger than a thumb, wrapped in paper. He unrolled it and handed it to me. A white label, handwritten in Robert's steady script, read, "For you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The weight of that tiny object was heavier than everything else combined. Victor's voice was low, almost reverent. He said only you would understand. I turned the drive in my palm. The surface was smooth, cold against my skin, yet it seemed to hum faintly, alive with his voice waiting to be heard. Robert had always left pieces of himself in small things. A wrench left on the counter, a note in the glove box, a hum in the air after he walked out of a room. But this was him speaking directly across time. I met Victor's eyes. "Then I will." The lights above flickered softly, reflecting against the Ferrari's curve. I slipped the USB into my coat pocket, close to my heart. "For you," I whispered, repeating the words under my breath until they became steady again. When I looked up, Victor had already stepped back, giving me silence to carry it. The hum of the showroom faded, replaced by the soft echo of memory, and a man's promise that still refused to die. The city lights blurred through the windshield, stretching into thin lines of gold and white. Rain had started again, gentle but constant, turning every reflection on the road into liquid memory. The hum of the tires filled the cabin, steady, rhythmic, almost like breathing. I crossed the old bridge just past the harbor. The water below shimmered with broken light, waves flickering in the glow of passing cars. In the rearview mirror, the city shrank behind me, glass towers dissolving into mist. Ahead, only darkness and the quiet sound of wind through a half-open window. Robert's voice echoed in my head, a fragment from years ago. He'd been tightening a bolt on the engine, smiling at the stubbornness of metal. He said, "The truth doesn't rust." The words floated now between the soft rhythm of rain and the low hum of the road. They didn't sound nostalgic. They sounded alive, like instructions. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, following the curve of the road that led home. Each mile washed away a layer of grief and left something sharper behind. By the time I turned onto my street, the sadness had thinned into focus. The plan hadn't fully formed yet, but it was there, waiting in the quiet like the next breath before a storm. The house was dark when I returned. I didn't turn on the lights. The only glow came from the laptop waiting on the kitchen table, its screen casting a faint blue halo over the wood. I sat down, pulled the USB from my coat pocket, and slid it into the port. A small folder appeared instantly, one single video file, no title, just a date. My hands hesitated over the keyboard. Then I clicked play. The screen flickered, grainy at first, then cleared. Robert's face appeared, tired, thinner, but unmistakably him. He looked straight into the camera, eyes steady, voice rough from age. "If they ever touch the car," he said, "they'll reveal themselves." He paused, breathing softly. "Trust the car more than people." The room seemed to shrink around me. Every sound disappeared. No rain, no ticking clock, only that voice I hadn't heard in months. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile he saved for when he'd already solved the puzzle before anyone else knew it existed. When the screen went black, I stayed still for a long time. Then I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection faint in the glass. I whispered the words again, steady this time. "Trust the car more than people." The truth didn't rust. It was waiting to be driven home. The next morning arrived gray and soundless. The rain had stopped, but the sky still hung low over the bay, heavy and watchful. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Robert used to read the paper every morning, and spread out a stack of blank pages. The journal he'd left lay open beside them, edges curled, pages streaked with graphite and oil. I turned to a fresh sheet and wrote the first words that came to me, slow and deliberate. Phase 1. Watch them. The ink bled slightly into the paper, a small bloom of black that looked almost alive. I leaned back, the pen still between my fingers, and watched the words dry. Revenge wasn't a scream, it was a system. Robert used to joke that every problem was just unfinished homework. Now his voice came back, clear and steady. Revenge is just another word for unfinished homework. I smiled faintly. He wasn't wrong. The lamp beside me buzzed softly, its light cutting a clean line across the page. Names, dates, questions began to form beneath that first sentence. Patterns, connections, ideas. It didn't matter how long it took. Every story left traces. All I had to do was follow them. When I finally set the pen down, the house felt different. Quiet, but not empty. Purpose hummed beneath the silence like electricity under skin. Phase 1. Watch them. That was how every storm began. The air in the study was colder than the rest of the house. I powered on Robert's old laptop, the fan whirring softly, the screen lighting up the room in pale blue. Dozens of files filled the desktop, most untouched since he died. One folder stood out, Victims Clara Case Docs X. I opened it. 2 names appeared on the list, Stephen Cross, Phoenix, and Alan Murphy, Tampa. Both underlined, both marked with the same word in red, warning. My pulse steadied. He'd been tracking her, Clara, or whoever she'd been before Berlin. This wasn't new. It was a pattern. I clicked on Stephen Cross's contact and pressed call. The ring dragged on, slow and hollow. Light from the monitor reflected off the window pane, splitting my face into fragments. Then a click. A man's voice, rough with age and distance. I knew this call would come. I swallowed. "Mr. Cross, my name is Adele Whitmore. My husband tried to warn you, didn't he?" A pause, then low and tired. "He did, but warning doesn't change hearts." The line crackled once, then went still. I sat there, listening to the quiet between the seconds, the ticking clock marking something new, the moment grief finally turned to pursuit. Clara wasn't a mistake. She was a method, and I was done being her silence. Stephen's voice came through the receiver like gravel dragged across memory. "She called herself Vanessa," he began. "Vanessa Cortland, said she was helping at the hospice where my mother stayed." He paused, breath heavy. "She brought coffee every morning. Sweet smile, soft hands. Told me she'd lost her mother too." I could picture it already. The act, the precision, the patience. "She'd sit by the window with Mom, reading her magazines," he continued. "She said grief needed company. I believed her." The sound of his voice cracked. "After Mom passed, Vanessa stayed, helped me sort through her things, told me I needed a clean start, that the house was full of ghosts." He swallowed hard. 2 weeks later, the place was listed. Sold before I even realized the paperwork had changed names. My hand clenched around the pen, pressing too hard against the paper. Stephen's voice fell to a whisper. She said it was for my peace of mind. Silence stretched, then softer, broken. She smiled when she lied. That's what made it hurt. I lowered my head, eyes closing. She still smiles that way. For a moment, neither of us spoke. All I could hear was the faint creak of his chair, his breathing, the echo of my own heartbeat matching his pain. That smile had already moved on, to my son, my family, my life. And now I knew her name wasn't Clara. It was Vanessa. The next name came easily. Alan Murphy. The line hissed before a slow voice answered, thick with fatigue. Yes? Mr. Murphy, I said, steadying my tone. My name is Adele Whitmore. I'm calling about a woman you once knew, Vanessa Cortland. A pause, then a sharp inhale. She was at my wife's funeral, he said quietly. Said she'd lost her husband young. Brought flowers, stayed behind to help me sort through things. He coughed once, the sound rough. She told me grief is temporary, debt isn't. I wrote the line down carefully. She convinced me to sell my father's workshop, he continued. Said the space was holding me back, keeping me in the past. His breath caught. I wired the payment. She disappeared 2 days later. So did the insurance money. The static filled the space between us, thin and endless. I pressed my pen harder, each word cutting into the paper. Her lies aged slower than her victims. When he hung up, I sat still, listening to the faint buzz of the empty line. 2 stories, 2 lives, 1 pattern. It wasn't grief anymore. It was structure, and I was going to break it, piece by piece, until she finally stopped smiling. The police station was quieter than I expected. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, throwing pale reflections across metal walls and glass doors. I stood at the reception desk, my hands tight around the folder Robert had left behind. A woman approached, mid-50s, sharp eyes softened by exhaustion. Detective Carla Hale, she said, offering a hand. I took it. Her grip was steady, unhurried, the kind of calm you learn from seeing too much. When I said Robert's name, something in her expression shifted. Robert Whitmore, she repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of it. She gestured toward a chair. He came here once, asked for help. I sat across from her. The hum of the lights filled the silence. Carla opened a drawer, pulling out a thin file marked Archive, 2022. She looked down at the label and sighed. We couldn't prove it back then. The trail went cold. Her words hit harder than I expected. All those nights Robert spent at his desk, his late phone calls, the careful notes, none of it had been wasted. He'd already seen what was coming. Carla closed the file gently, eyes steady on mine. Your husband was right, Mrs. Whitmore. I met her gaze, voice firm. Then let's make it matter now. She nodded once, decisive. The sound of her pen clicking open felt like the first real step forward. Justice wasn't sleeping. It had just been waiting for me to arrive. Carla led me into a smaller room lit by the soft glow of a single desk lamp. She sat down, opened a laptop, and began typing quietly. The screen filled with old documents, scanned pages marked with timestamps and case numbers. One file blinked at the top. Subject: Suspected Financial Exploitation. Carla turned the screen toward me. At the bottom of the page was his signature, Robert Whitmore, written in the same clean, deliberate hand that had filled his journal. I felt my throat tighten. He tried, and they ignored him. Carla nodded, eyes tired but resolute. Then now we don't. She scrolled down further. Attached beneath his report were notes, receipts, and photos, proof of patterns, transfers, the same faces repeated under different names. Every breadcrumb he'd left behind was there, sealed away, forgotten. The soft whir of an old printer broke the silence as Carla began to copy the file. Each page slid out like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. I reached forward, my fingertips brushing his signature on the screen. The pain was still there, but beneath it, something steadier. Pride. He had been right all along. And now, finally, someone was listening. The light from the monitor reflected in my glasses as I whispered, "This time, we finish it." Carla slid a folder across the table. The paper inside was thin, but its weight hit like stone. "Bank statement," she said. Pulled it from the dealership's transaction logs. I looked down. The numbers were clean, cold, and final. $15,000. Transfer to Elena Marsh, Deutsche Bank, Berlin. Carla's pen traced the line once. Same pattern, different name. Every victim she's touched leads back to one of these accounts. I studied the ink, the dates, the precision. Berlin, that word again. "Berlin wasn't for business," I said quietly. "It was for escape." Carla nodded. "And she's done it before." She turned the page. 5 more entries, each one a mirror of the last. Different names, same trail of vanished funds. My son's name appeared in one memo, authorized cosigner. The air seemed to tighten around us. For the first time, I didn't feel grief. I felt direction. Pain was a kind of blindness. Now, every number looked like a road sign pointing to her. Carla looked up. "If we move carefully, we can trace the network. But we'll need her to think she's still winning." I nodded, voice calm. She always underestimates what quiet looks like. The screen light shimmered over the table, cold and white. I wasn't just reading evidence anymore. I was writing the next chapter. The house was silent again. The kind of silence that breathes, slow, deep, waiting. I sat at Robert's old desk, the one carved with faint scratches from his tools. The lamp glowed a soft amber circle over his journal. The last page I'd read still carried his scent, oil and paper, memory and dust. His handwriting curved with the same patience he'd once given every bolt, every gear. Protect our son, even from himself. My hand trembled slightly as I traced the words. He had known this moment might come. He had prepared me not for mourning, but for battle. I turned the page. Notes about accounts, passwords, lists, every detail hidden beneath his gentle phrasing. He'd left instructions. I just never knew they were for war. The clock ticked softly in the next room. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing against the windows like a voice I almost recognized. I whispered into the quiet, "I will, Robert." For the first time, the fear inside me felt smaller than the promise I'd made. The night settled around the house, not heavy but purposeful, like armor being fitted in the dark. Morning light spilled across the desk in thin, sharp lines. Papers lay everywhere, bank logs, printed emails, old statements from Robert's files. The hum of the printer filled the room like steady breathing. Each sheet came out marked and precise. I stacked them neatly, labeling the first, Phase 2, Trap Design. The ink bled slightly at the edges, but the words stood strong. I opened my laptop and began uploading the files to the shared folder Carla had created. Each document blinked once before disappearing into the cloud, like soldiers marching to their stations. "He built cars," I murmured. "I build cases." Robert's notes had been engineering blueprints. Mine were blueprints for justice. He designed motion, how a machine could run without chaos. I was learning to apply the same principle to people. The cursor on my screen blinked at the last line of my report. Subject, Clara Morgan. Alias, Vanessa Cortland. Pattern confirmed. My finger hovered over the send button. The glow from the monitor caught in the lens of my glasses, outlining a thin, deliberate smile. Click. Outside, a bird cried once, sharp and distant. Inside, the sound of the email whooshing away was quieter than a sigh. The trap had begun to close, silently, perfectly. 2 weeks later, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway again. The white BMW rolled in like nothing had ever happened. I stood in the kitchen doorway, towel in hand, watching through the window. Clara stepped out first, sunglasses gleaming, lips painted the color of wine. Jason followed behind her, face pale from travel, eyes averted. She waved cheerfully. "Surprise! Berlin was wonderful. We brought gifts." Her tone was silk over steel. She handed me a small box wrapped in red tissue. Inside lay a silk scarf, crimson and glossy. "You'd look lovely in red," she said sweetly. I met her smile with one of my own. "Red's a dangerous color." The air between us tightened. Her smile flickered, just for a second. She slipped off her glasses, eyes searching mine, then glanced at Jason. "I booked you a health appointment next week," she said lightly. "You've seemed tired lately." "Thoughtful of you," I replied. "I've been taking care of myself." Her gaze lingered, measuring, waiting for a crack that didn't come. What she didn't see was the small security camera blinking behind her shoulder, hidden among the ivy. This time, I was the one watching. Her reflection in the window overlapped with mine. 2 calm faces, one of them lying. Clara leaned against the doorframe, still smiling that curated smile. "Let's celebrate being back," she said brightly. "A nice dinner, just the 3 of us. No tension this time." Jason shifted behind her, uneasy. "Yeah, Mom, it'd be good to talk." I dried my hands slowly, turning toward them. "Dinner. The oldest stage for betrayal and pretense." I gave a small nod. "Dinner's perfect," I said evenly. "You choose the wine." Her smile widened, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, the calculation. She thought she was drawing me back into her circle. She didn't know I'd already built my own. "Tomorrow night, then?" she asked. "Tomorrow's fine." When the door closed behind her, the air seemed to exhale. The hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, steady and cold. Predators love dinner invitations. They believe the table belongs to them. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, watching the dark liquid spiral away. The reflection on the window showed 2 faces, the one I used to be and the one I'd become. Tomorrow night, I would sit across from her, and this time she wouldn't be the one holding the knife. The next evening, the house smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon, a polite disguise for something far less gentle. On the vanity table, a thin silver necklace lay coiled like a secret. I held it steady as I slipped the tiny microphone into its hollow pendant, the wire hidden behind the clasp. "Testing 1, 2, I whispered. The small receiver on the dresser blinked red. A second later, my voice echoed softly through a tinny speaker. Familiar, but detached. It worked. I took a slow breath. "If you ever find this recording," I said quietly, "it means I've done what I had to." The clock ticked once. I opened the drawer and pulled out Robert's photo. Him in his workshop, sleeves rolled, a smear of grease across his cheek, eyes alive with purpose. I set the picture beside the door. "You built machines," I murmured, slipping the necklace around my neck. "I'm building justice." The mirror caught my reflection. Calm, composed, older, but unbroken. Outside, the first drops of rain hit the window, soft and deliberate. I turned off the lamp. In the half-dark, the faint red light of the recorder pulsed against my skin like a heartbeat. Every sound from now on would matter. Every word would count. And when the dinner began, the silence would finally speak for me. The room was dim, the only light coming from the laptop screen. The inbox sat open, waiting. I read the message one last time. To Detective Carla Hale. Subject: Tonight, 7 p.m. No details, no emotion, just precision. My hand hovered for a second above the trackpad. Then I clicked send. The small whoosh of the email leaving sounded louder than it should have. Final, irreversible. I checked the clock on the wall, 6:45 p.m. The second hand moved steady, unhurried, like it knew what was coming. On the counter beside me, the recorder blinked once, armed and ready. The necklace rested against my collarbone, cool and silent. Everything was set. The wire, the trigger, the witness waiting at the other end of the screen. I leaned back in my chair, breathing out slowly. The scent of lemon polish and old wood filled the air, oddly comforting. Robert's watch ticked on my wrist, a metronome counting down the seconds to justice. Justice doesn't announce itself. It arrives, right on time. The light from the monitor dimmed as the laptop went to sleep. For a moment, the entire house was quiet enough to hear my own heartbeat, and beneath that sound, I could almost hear him, Robert's calm, steady voice saying, "Go finish it." The sky burned orange as the sun sank behind the trees. The road to Jason's house felt longer than I remembered, lined with lanterns that flickered like watchful eyes. When I parked in front of their glass-walled villa, the air smelled of rosemary and ambition. I stepped out, heels clicking softly against the stone. The door opened before I could knock. Clara stood there, perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect lie. "Adele," she said warmly, "you made it. Come in." The dining room glowed with candlelight. Crystal glasses, white linen, silver knives. Jason sat stiff at the table, pretending to check his phone. Clara lifted a decanter, the red wine catching the light like blood. "Let's celebrate," she said, filling the glasses. "To family." I placed my purse on the table, the recorder inside already running. I smiled, steady. "To the truth." Our glasses touched. The sound was sharp, ringing a little too long. Jason looked between us, sensing the tension he couldn't name. Clara leaned back, smiling that same dangerous smile she used on everyone she planned to destroy. Evening dresses hide the sharpest blades, and tonight, mine wasn't made of steel. It was made of silence, patient, polished, and ready. Outside, a clock struck 7. The silverware sang a quiet rhythm between us, metal on porcelain, soft, deliberate. Clara carved her steak with too much precision, smiling without warmth. "Berlin was beautiful," she said casually. "You should have come, Mother. You'd love the art galleries." I dabbed the corner of my mouth with the napkin. "I prefer quieter places," I said, voice steady. "They reveal more." Her knife paused mid-slice. Jason looked up from his plate, eyes flicking between us like a spectator at a match he didn't want to watch. Clara leaned back, swirling her wine. "You sound almost suspicious." I met her gaze evenly. Almost. The word lingered, thin as smoke. She laughed, but it came out too sharp, too rehearsed. The candlelight caught the glass behind her, splitting her reflection in two. For a moment, I wondered if even she knew which version of herself she was tonight, the charming host or the cornered liar. Jason shifted, his fork clattering softly against the plate. The sound cracked through the tension like thunder in a closed room. Clara's smile flickered again, the muscles in her cheek tightening, a tremor she couldn't hide. I lifted my glass but didn't drink. The liquid trembled slightly, catching the light, red as warning. Across the table, Clara blinked first. And in that small movement, victory began to taste real. Clara reached for her wine, her hand too quick, her voice just a touch too bright. "Well," she said, "since we're all together again, let's toast, shall we?" Jason nodded, relieved to break the silence. She raised her glass high. "To family who forgive." The words hovered in the air like bait. I tilted my glass, meeting her eyes across the candlelight. "And to husbands who still protect." The room froze. Jason's smile faltered. The fork slipped from his hand, landing against the plate with a dull clang. Clara didn't move. Her eyes narrowed, just slightly, but enough. She swallowed hard, the motion visible in her throat. I could see the realization settle behind her stare. I knew. No one spoke. The sound of the clock ticking in the hall grew louder, stretching the silence until it felt heavy enough to touch. I let it linger. Truth doesn't need champagne, just silence long enough to echo. Our glasses met with the faintest sound, almost too soft to hear. Jason looked between us, confusion twisting into dread. The wine shimmered in Clara's glass, untouched. When she finally took a sip, her hand trembled. And in the stillness that followed, the game shifted. She knew she was no longer the only one playing. Clara rested her elbows lightly on the table, chin propped on her perfect hand. The smile had returned, soft, polished, practiced. "You deserve rest, Adele," she said sweetly. "You've done enough. Let us handle everything from now on." Her tone dripped with sugar, but the blade was hidden just beneath it. I placed my fork down carefully, its edge catching the light. "Including what's already been handled?" Jason shifted in his chair, eyes darting between us. "She's just saying—" "I know what she's saying," I cut in. The air thickened. Even the candle flames seemed to still. Clara smiled wider, tilting her head. "There's nothing wrong with letting go, is there? We're family." Her voice lowered, almost whispering, "You can trust us to take care of things." I didn't answer. My hand slid slightly toward the stem of my glass, steady, deliberate. The recorder beneath my blouse blinked once, silent, patient. She thought she was steering the conversation, but she was already confessing control. Her words tangled themselves into the very net she believed she owned. Jason stared down at his plate, avoiding both our eyes. The knife beside his hand gleamed under the candlelight, trembling faintly. I looked at Clara, expression calm. "Trust," I said softly, "isn't something you demand. It's something you earn." Her smile faltered. The first crack had begun to show. Clara's laugh came too quickly, brittle as glass. "Oh, Adele," she said, swirling her wine. "Age is cruel, isn't it?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "Not as cruel as greed." The silence that followed was tight, electric. Jason shifted, uneasy, opening his mouth as if to calm us both. But Clara spoke again, too fast, too sure. "Jason," she said sharply, "she won't remember much soon anyway." The words hit the room like shattering porcelain. Her voice, so controlled moments before, now trembled with the echo of truth. Jason froze. The knife slipped from his hand, clattering against the plate. Wine rippled in his glass, spilling down the stem like a thin red vein. "What did you just say?" he whispered. Clara blinked, realizing too late what had left her mouth. Her face went pale, the facade cracking under its own weight. I didn't move. I simply looked at her, eyes steady, voice quiet enough to cut. "The truth always slips," I said, "especially when arrogance speaks." Jason's gaze met mine for the first time that night. Confusion, fear, and something else. Awakening. Between us, the recorder pulsed faintly beneath the pendant. It had caught every word, and for the first time, Clara looked afraid of silence. The chair legs scraped against the marble, slicing through the silence like a warning. Clara stood, her glass trembling in her hand. "Enough of this," she snapped. "You're twisting my words." I didn't flinch. I folded my hands neatly in my lap. "Did Robert deserve that too?" Her face tightened. "What?" "The way you speak of people once they've served their purpose." I paused. "Did he deserve that too?" Her jaw clenched. The mask cracked. "He got what he deserved." Jason's head snapped up. "What does that mean?" She hesitated, realizing too late that she'd said too much. "It means," she spat, "I'm tired of pretending." Her voice rang through the dining room, echoing off the glass walls. The candle flickered violently, throwing her shadow across the table. Long, sharp, monstrous. Jason pushed back his chair, face pale, hands gripping the edge of the table. "You planned this, didn't you?" Clara's lips parted, searching for a lie, but none came. Her breathing grew shallow, uneven. The confidence that once wrapped her like perfume began to dissolve into panic. I leaned forward slightly, voice quiet but firm. "Anger," I said, "the last mask to fall." And in that instant, it did. Every ounce of her composure collapsed, and the truth finally had a face. The air was electric, heavy with the sound of her breathing. I reached into my purse, pulling out my phone with slow precision. Her eyes followed every movement. "What are you doing?" she demanded. letting you listen to yourself," I said. The small click of the play button filled the room like a gunshot. Then came her voice, clear, perfect, undeniable. He got what he deserved. The sound echoed against the glass walls, doubling back on her from every direction. Her own words became her accuser. Clara froze, color draining from her face. You recorded me?" Jason took a step back, eyes wide, disbelief turning to horror. The truth was no longer hidden between us. It was playing in real time. She tried to laugh, but it broke halfway. "You set me up," she whispered. The phone kept playing, each line, each confession, every fragment of her arrogance now immortalized. Jason's hands trembled. He couldn't look at her. He couldn't look at me. I turned the phone screen toward Clara. Her reflection stared back at her through the glass, smiling, furious, cornered. The only voice left in the room was hers, and it was tearing her world apart. Clara's breath came fast, shallow, desperate. Her perfect posture cracked, hands trembling as she pointed toward me. "She's manipulating you, Jason. Can't you see it? She's been doing this since the day I met her." Jason didn't move. His eyes were glassy, wide, like a man who had finally woken in the middle of a nightmare. "No," he said quietly. "You did." Clara's voice rose, sharp and frantic. "You'd still be broke without me. You'd still be nothing." The words sliced through the air, echoing against the walls that had heard too many lies already. Jason flinched as if the truth had struck him physically. He looked at her, really looked, and saw her for what she was. "I thought you loved him," I said softly, "at least enough to respect his memory." She spun toward me, tears burning through her mascara, fury shaking her voice. "Don't act righteous, Adele. You don't know what love costs." Jason whispered, "Apparently, $15,000. The silence after that was heavy, suffocating. Clara's reflection wavered in the mirror behind her, broken, multiplied, fading. Her tears weren't for guilt. They were for losing control. I didn't speak again. Some truths don't need defending. They defend themselves. The air was still, thick with everything that had been said. Jason sat motionless, hands gripping the edge of the table. Clara's eyes darted between us, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. I reached for my phone. No rush, no hesitation, just purpose. One tap. The email window opened. The file, the recording, already attached, time-stamped, undeniable. I typed one word in the subject line, justice. Then I pressed send. The sound of the ping filled the room, small but final. Carla's reply appeared seconds later. Recording received. Clara stared at me, face pale under the candlelight. "You can't—" I cut her off gently. "Dinner's over." The flames on the table flickered, then died, leaving only smoke curling in the air. Jason's face turned away, eyes wet but steady. Outside, sirens began to hum faintly in the distance, soft, growing closer. Clara sank into her chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks, the fight gone from her voice. I stood slowly, slipping Robert's watch back under my sleeve. Justice had arrived, quiet, punctual, and complete. The doorbell cut through the silence like a blade. Clara froze mid-breath, eyes flicking toward the hallway. Jason didn't move. He just stared at the table, at the empty glass still trembling beside his hand. I stood quietly, not turning, not speaking. The second chime came, firm, deliberate. Then the sound of a lock sliding open. Detective Carla Hale stepped into the room, her badge catching the dim light. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, her tone calm but certain. "Thank you." Clara's laugh came out shaky, brittle. "You can't prove anything." Carla held up her phone. "We can now." 2 officers followed her in. The beam of a flashlight swept across the dining room, grazing the spilled wine, the cold plates, the shattered calm. Clara backed away, hands trembling. "This is a mistake! He told me to sell it! He—" "Mrs. Morgan," Carla interrupted gently, "please stand up." Clara did, but her knees gave slightly. The sound of the cuffs clicking shut was soft, metallic, absolute. Jason looked up, his face drained, lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no words came. Carla nodded to me once before leading Clara toward the door. The hallway light spilled across the floor, slicing the darkness clean in half. And then, just like that, she was gone. The house exhaled after they left. It was the kind of silence that followed a storm. Thick, heavy, sacred. I began clearing the table, one glass at a time. The clink of crystal against porcelain echoed faintly through the room. The smell of wine and burnt candle wax lingered in the air. Jason stood near the doorway, eyes lowered. "Mom?" I didn't answer. He needed the silence more than I did. I carried the dishes to the sink. The water ran cold at first, then warm, then steady. Each plate disappeared beneath the foam, leaving nothing but reflection behind. For a long moment I watched the surface shimmer, the faint ripples of movement, the distorted image of my own face. The sound of water became a kind of music. "Revenge is loud," I whispered, almost to myself. "Justice is quiet." The last glass slipped beneath the water, the echo fading to stillness. I turned off the tap. The house was spotless again, but not empty. Outside, a siren wailed once more, faint in the distance, an ending note to a symphony no one would ever hear. I dried my hands, took a deep breath, and let the silence return home. The morning light crept across the desk, soft and forgiving. I sat with a blank sheet of paper before me, the pen warm between my fingers. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt full. I began to write. "Dear Robert, the car is gone, but your design worked. It saved me." The words flowed easily, each one lighter than the last. "You built machines that lasted, but you built something stronger in me. A sense that justice doesn't always need noise. It just needs time." I paused, glancing toward the small box on the shelf, the microphone necklace resting beside it, its red light forever still. "Your plan didn't just catch them, Robert. It caught me too, in the moment between grief and clarity. I see it now." The ink shimmered faintly under the sunlight. "Our son knows the truth. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what you wanted all along." I folded the letter carefully and slid it into an ivory envelope. Beside it, I placed the necklace, coiling the chain like a signature of closure. Justice doesn't end with punishment. It ends with memory. The wind stirred through the open window, lifting the edge of the paper just before I sealed it. Outside, the first birds began to sing. Dawn had arrived, and for the first time, I didn't dread the light. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow, deliberate, final. A fluorescent hum filled the interrogation room, cold and constant. Clara sat across from Carla Hale, wrists cuffed, hair disheveled, but eyes still defiant. "Why did you target your own family?" Carla asked quietly. Clara leaned back, forcing a thin smile. "Family is just the easiest kind of trust." Behind the one-way glass, I stood beside Jason. He didn't speak. His reflection overlapped with hers, two sides of the same broken image. Clara's smile wavered when Carla slid the evidence folder forward. Inside were the statements, the wire transcript, the audio file, every lie cataloged, time-stamped, undeniable. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, "Tell her I'll give back the money." Carla didn't respond. Neither did I. Through the glass, I watched her mouth tremble, the same mouth that once smiled at my table, raised my wine, toasted to family. Jason's hand gripped the edge of the glass. "She's really gone, isn't she?" he whispered. I nodded slowly. She was gone long before tonight. Silence, the only language guilt understands. The light flickered once overhead, washing everything in pale white. For the first time, justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like truth, finally standing still. The conference room smelled faintly of toner and cold coffee. Across the wall stretched a mosaic of truth. Photos, maps, receipts, printouts, all connected by thin red threads. In the center, Ferrari sale, Berlin transfer, audio confession. Carla stood in front of it, her pen tapping the corner of a photo. "She left a trail she thought was invisible," she said. I stepped closer. The board felt alive, lines crossing continents, leading back to one woman's greed. Clara in sunglasses, Clara at the bank, Clara signing under a different name. "Elena Marsh," Carla continued. "Fake passport, Berlin account, same handwriting. We traced the alias to an old file from Arizona, another couple, same pattern." The words hit me harder than I expected. Robert had seen it all before it happened. He hadn't just built a trap, he'd built a map. Jason stood beside me, hands in pockets, staring at the photos of the car. He whispered, "Dad knew her better than I ever did." I nodded slowly. He didn't need to know her, he only needed to know patterns. Carla pinned the last sheet, a transaction marked "Closed case reopened." The sound of the pin clicking into cork echoed like a heartbeat. Every crime leaves fingerprints, even in words. The red thread stretched tight under the fluorescent light, connecting everything Robert tried to warn us about, and in that moment, I realized he had never really left. The prosecutor's office smelled of ink and paperwork, the kind of place where truth lived in black and white. Across the table, the district attorney adjusted his glasses and looked at me. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said softly, "are you ready to testify?" I met his eyes without hesitation. "I was ready 8 months ago." He slid the affidavit forward, the top page crisp, the ink still drying. Carla sat beside me, quiet but present, her steady presence anchoring the room. The pen felt heavy in my hand, not like a weapon, not like revenge, more like closure, weighted with every moment that brought me here. I signed slowly. The nib scratched against the paper, the sound sharp, deliberate, final. When I lifted the pen, the ink shimmered slightly before settling into the fibers. Some signatures weigh more than inheritance. I exhaled, the air trembling on the way out. Across the table, the prosecutor nodded once, sliding the document into a folder labeled State vs. Morgan. Carla reached over and touched my wrist briefly. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "he'd be proud." I smiled faintly. "I know." The camera flash went off for the record copy. The photo caught the signature still glistening. Proof that justice, once written, can't be erased. The courthouse buzzed with noise. Reporters, cameras, the low murmur of voices waiting for spectacle. Flashlights burst like lightning across polished marble floors. Outside, microphones pointed like arrows. I kept my coat buttoned, my eyes forward. "No comment," I said quietly as I passed the press line. The cameras still clicked, desperate to turn someone's pain into headlines. Inside, the air changed. Cooler, calmer. The place where truth stopped whispering and started speaking. Clara entered through the side door, escorted by 2 officers. The orange of her prison uniform looked foreign against her pale skin. She tried to smile for the cameras, but the muscles betrayed her. Too tight, too forced. When her eyes met mine, the facade faltered. For the first time, the woman who thrived on control had nowhere to hide. The bailiff called order. The hum of voices quieted, swallowed by the stillness of the courtroom. I took my seat at the witness bench, hands folded neatly, heart steady. Outside, another flash went off through the glass. Inside, silence took its place, pure, cold, deliberate. Justice hates applause. It prefers rooms like this, where truth doesn't need an audience, only witnesses. I looked across the aisle once more. Clara blinked in the harsh fluorescent light, her forced grin trembling. Even her shadow looked nervous. The court clerk adjusted the microphone. The air was thick, the kind that made every breath sound louder than it should. The prosecutor rose. "Please state your relation to the defendant." I leaned forward slightly, voice calm. "She married my son," I said. "Then she buried my husband's legacy." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. I didn't look at them. I only looked at the judge and then at Jason, seated quietly in the back row, eyes red, hands clenched. I trusted her, I continued. We all did. But trust doesn't excuse theft, and love doesn't erase accountability. The prosecutor nodded. What made you decide to come forward, Mrs. Whitmore? I didn't raise my voice, I said slowly. I raised the truth. He pressed a button on the console. The courtroom speakers clicked to life. Then came the sound, her voice, clear and sharp. He got what he deserved. The entire room fell silent. Even the lights seemed to dim for a heartbeat. Clara's shoulders tightened, her head lowered. Jason wiped at his face, silent tears streaking down his cheek. I looked down at my folded hands, not triumphant, not vindictive, just still. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It only needed to be heard once, clearly enough to last. The courtroom was a held breath, silent, waiting. Then Clara snapped. You think you're better than me? She screamed, slamming her palms against the table. Her voice cracked, raw and uncontrolled. He adored me. Robert adored me. You were just the quiet wife who stayed out of his way. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's gavel hit once, twice. Order! But Clara couldn't stop. You all think I stole from him? I earned every cent. Every transfer was mine. Her words tumbled out faster, her mask falling with each syllable. Berlin wasn't a crime. It was an investment. He knew. They all knew. Carla rose slowly, calm as still water. For the record, the defendant just admitted to unauthorized transfer of federal assets. Clara froze mid-breath. The realization hit like a physical blow. Her face drained of color. The silence that followed was louder than her rage. Jason lowered his head, the sound of quiet crying breaking the stillness. He couldn't look at her anymore. I watched without a word. My hands were still, my eyes steady. Even in defeat, she performed. But this time, the stage belonged to justice, not to her. The gavel struck again, final and hard. The echo rolled through the room, sealing everything she'd tried to deny. The judge read from the file, his tone even, unshaken. On the charges of fraud, financial exploitation, and conspiracy, this court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. The room didn't move. Clara stood motionless, her eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open, as if the words had stolen her breath. Jason sat behind me, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. He didn't cry this time. He just whispered, "It's over." The bailiff stepped forward. The handcuffs clicked around Clara's wrists once more. For a moment she looked straight at me. No fury, no arrogance, just emptiness. Justice doesn't heal. It clarifies. The sunlight through the high windows fell across the floor, forming a narrow path between us. 15 years. That's what the judge said next. 15 years to count what greed had cost. Jason stood abruptly, voice low but certain. "I'll file for divorce," he said. "Today." The courtroom buzzed again, soft whispers rising and falling like waves. Clara turned her head toward him, eyes wide, then empty again. The gavel came down once more. The beam of light shifted, glinting off her cuffs. And as she was led away, I closed my eyes, not in triumph, but in peace. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Boxes stacked along the hallway, curtains half-tied, the air thick with dust and silence. Jason stood in the middle of it all, a man surrounded by the pieces of his old life. He turned when he heard my footsteps. "I don't know how to start over," he said quietly. His voice had no anger left in it, only exhaustion. I looked around at the empty shelves, the faint mark on the wall where a picture once hung. "Start small," I told him. "Oil the engine first." He frowned for a second, then laughed, a sound too soft to echo, but enough to warm the room. We stood there, just breathing in the dust and quiet. No lectures, no apologies, just a truce made of air and memory. He reached out, awkward at first, then held on. His arms were shaking. Mine weren't. Forgiveness is mechanical. You fix what still runs. Outside, the light moved slowly across the floor, golden and clean. Jason let go, wiping at his eyes. "I'll be okay," he said. "I know," I answered, and meant it. For the first time in months, the silence between us didn't hurt. It hummed, low and steady, like an engine remembering how to start again. The morning was clear, the air crisp with the kind of stillness only closure brings. Then I heard it, the deep, throaty growl of an engine I knew by heart. The Ferrari. I stepped outside as the car turned the corner, sunlight sliding along its polished red body. Tom Graves was behind the wheel, grinning beneath his cap. He parked slowly, the engine purring down to silence. "She belongs here," he said, stepping out and handing me the keys. I stared at the car, Robert's car, rebuilt, restored, reborn. Every line of it carried a memory, every bolt a piece of him. Jason came out from the porch, still in his rolled-up sleeves. Tom turned toward him. "Your father would have wanted you to finish what he started." He held out the keys. Jason hesitated, then took them with both hands, trembling slightly. The metal gleamed in the sunlight, warm against his palms. "I will," he said, voice low. Some returns make no sound, only peace. Tom nodded once, then left us there. The Ferrari sat quiet in the garage again. Home, at last. The oil stain on the floor still marked where it once stood, now aligned perfectly beneath the wheels. The silence inside that garage didn't echo loss. It breathed gratitude. The garage smelled of oil again. Not loss this time, life. Jason stood beside me, holding the old leather notebook Robert used to keep near the engine. The pages were smudged with fingerprints, diagrams, numbers, and his handwriting. He flipped it open carefully, the spine creaking. "He wrote down everything," Jason whispered. I smiled faintly. "Start with the oil." He nodded, reaching for the wrench. The sound of metal echoed softly, steady and rhythmic, the kind of sound that once filled this place when Robert was still alive. I held the light steady while Jason worked, the beam catching the thin veil of dust in the air. It danced above the red hood like gold in water. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Every small gesture was a sentence, every shared glance a chapter rewritten. When he tightened the last bolt, he leaned back and exhaled. "It feels like he's here," he said. "He is," I answered quietly. The engine hummed once when we tested it. A low, faithful sound, stronger than grief. The sound of redemption is made of metal. The sunlight through the garage window touched both our faces, warm and soft. For the first time, the silence felt complete, not empty. The car gleamed. The air steadied. 2 weeks later, the nameplate was ready. Whitmore Foundation for Truth. Simple, clean. The words engraved in brushed steel, strong, unpretentious, unbreakable. Carla stood beside me as the ribbon was cut. Reporters flashed cameras, but I kept my eyes on the plaque. "This is for them," I said. "We'll help the next ones before they call." Carla smiled, quiet pride in her eyes. Robert would approve. Inside the small office, boxes of brochures waited to be mailed. Support for victims of financial exploitation. Jason arranged them neatly on the counter. When he caught me watching, he smiled. "I thought you could use someone on the board." I nodded. "I already do." He turned toward the wall where Robert's photo hung, the same one from the workshop, his hands covered in grease, smiling at the camera. Justice grows best when planted in memory. The afternoon light spilled across the floor, reaching the picture frame and glowing softly along Robert's face. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel like I was carrying his legacy. I was continuing it. The sound of printers and voices filled the room. It didn't sound like justice anymore. It sounded like hope. The air smelled of oil, leather, and morning. Jason opened the passenger door while I slid into the driver's seat, the same seat Robert had adjusted 100 times, always saying it needed to fit the soul, not the spine. The key turned. The Ferrari came alive. The engine didn't roar. It remembered. Light spilled into the garage, chasing the dust into gold. Jason looked at me, hesitant, but proud. "You sure you want to drive?" he asked. I smiled. "I've waited long enough." The tires rolled over the concrete, smooth and certain. The house faded in the rear mirror, small and quiet, like a story finally told. He built this car to last longer than love, longer than pain. Turns out, he was right. We didn't talk as we turned onto the coastal road. The sky opened in front of us, pale gold and full of promise. Wind rushed through the cracked window, warm against my cheek. Jason reached for the radio, but I shook my head. "Let the car speak." It did. Every vibration a memory, every hum a heartbeat. The sun climbed higher, painting the asphalt in silver light. When we reached the top of the hill, I slowed, letting the horizon stretch ahead. "Let's go home," I said softly, and the engine answered. The car glided forward, red against the morning, its shadow long and graceful behind us. The sound faded into the wind, peaceful, endless. The first sound I heard was quiet, no ticking clocks, no voices, just the steady rhythm of a new day breathing. I opened the curtains. The morning poured in, warm and gentle, brushing against the floorboards and walls as if testing its way back inside this house. After the storm, the silence has its own sound. The tea kettle whistled softly. Steam rose in the air, thin ribbons curling toward the light. I poured slowly, the amber liquid glinting like sunlight caught in glass. Across the table sat Robert's photograph, the same one from the workshop. He was smiling, faintly tilted, like he always knew this piece would come. I sat down opposite him, hands around the cup. "You were right," I whispered. "Truth lasts longer than anger." The wind nudged the curtain once, then stilled. Outside, the garden shimmered, alive again. Silence filled the house, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of memory, of promise, of light. And as the sun lifted higher, I realized the story wasn't ending. It was simply breathing. The morning was calm, washed in soft gold. I stepped outside with my robe still tied loosely, the chill air carrying the scent of damp earth. The mailbox stood under the maple tree, shadowed and familiar. When I opened it, a single white envelope lay inside, catching the sunlight like a mirror. My name, typed, precise. The seal of the Charleston District Court pressed in blue. Justice doesn't end in court. It lingers in paper. I carried it back inside, the sound of it brushing against my palm, steady and thin. The letter slid out easily, official words printed across heavy stock. The verdict summary, the closure every case dreams of. Attached to it, another smaller envelope, handwritten, "From Carla." I unfolded her note slowly. "Adele," it began. "The case inspired 2 more victims to come forward. Both said your voice gave them courage to speak. Thank you for being the proof that truth can age gracefully." The words blurred for a moment before settling clear again. I folded the note carefully, almost ceremoniously, and placed it beside Robert's photograph on the mantel. Then I looked at the window, the light resting gently across the floorboards. A faint smile came, quiet and certain. Justice doesn't roar. It whispers, waits, and stays. I picked up the kettle, poured another cup of tea, and sat down. Outside, a postal truck passed by, its rumble low and fading. Inside, the paper rested still, a symbol, not of ending, but of endurance. The afternoon sun drifted low, soft and orange. In the garage, the air smelled of paint and gasoline, the same comforting perfume of old work and patient time. Jason stood over the hood of the Ferrari, a brush in one hand, the other steadying the surface. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, his concentration absolute. "I think I finally got the shade right," he said, turning slightly toward me. I leaned on the doorway, hands folded. "Your father would have argued for darker red." Jason smiled, that same half-smile Robert used to wear when he disagreed, but pretended not to. The brush moved again, slow, deliberate strokes over metal. The light caught on each movement, turning the wet paint into liquid fire. He left us colors, not instructions. The sound of the brush, the faint hum of the drying fan. It was music, a kind that didn't need words. I watched Jason step back, eyes reflecting the crimson gleam. For a second, it felt as if time had folded in on itself. Robert standing behind him, correcting the angle of his wrist, the laughter echoing off the walls. When Jason turned, there was peace in his eyes. "What do you think?" I smiled. "It's perfect. It remembers." The sunlight deepened, and the new paint glowed, bright, alive, eternal. A legacy reborn in red. The tide was low, the sky brushed in pale blue and silver. I walked along the sand, the hem of my coat catching the breeze. The same stretch of beach where Robert and I once stood, laughing 40 years ago, his tie crooked, my veil full of salt wind. The air smelled the same, seaweed, salt, memory. The ocean had erased our footprints long ago, but somehow it still remembered. We thought love ended when the body stopped. We were wrong. I bent down and picked up a smooth gray stone. The edges were cold, perfect in their imperfection. With a quiet breath, I threw it gently into the water. The ripples widened, then disappeared, swallowed by the moving tide. For a moment, the world slowed. The sound of waves folded into the echo of laughter that wasn't there but felt near. Robert's laugh, the one that always arrived half a second before mine. In a faint shimmer of light, I saw it. The reflection of the sun across the water looked like metal under flame. The same glow that once lived on the hood of his Ferrari. The wind shifted. My scarf brushed against my cheek, soft as a memory saying goodbye. And as the sea rolled forward again, calm and sure, I smiled, because love hadn't left. It had simply changed shape. Back home, the house was quiet, filled only with the soft creak of floorboards. I opened the cabinet and pulled out a thick leather album, the one marked 1978, 1998. Dust motes lifted in the air like tiny ghosts of time. The first photograph showed Robert leaning over the Ferrari, his hands stained with oil, a streak of sunlight cutting across his arm. His eyes looked different there, alive, determined, entirely at peace. He never raced to win. He built to last. I traced the photo with my fingertip, the gloss smooth and cold. Each page turned with a soft sigh. Our wedding, our first house, the first scratch on the car's hood. Behind me, footsteps, Jason. He leaned against the doorway, eyes scanning the page. "We should frame that one," he said, pointing at the photo of Robert standing beside the half-restored Ferrari, smiling like a man who already knew he'd built forever. I nodded, closing the album slowly. The light from the window caught the plastic cover, bending the image into a soft glow. The past didn't vanish. It just learned how to shine differently. The hall was bright, washed in soft ivory light. A simple banner hung above the stage, Whitmore Foundation for Truth. No fanfare, no orchestra, just quiet faces, hopeful eyes, and the murmur of something beginning again. I stood at the podium, the wooden edge warm under my hands. Jason adjusted the microphone, gave a small nod. Carla sat in the front row, her notebook resting on her lap, eyes steady. "We build," I said slowly, "so others won't fall." The room hushed, like it understood. Behind me, the foundation's emblem caught the light, a circle enclosing a small engraving of a car's wheel and an open book, metal and knowledge, justice and motion. Some legacies are loud. Ours breathes quietly. The audience clapped softly, polite but sincere. Each sound felt earned, honest. I looked at the display table beside the stage, Robert's old wrench, polished and framed, the small Ferrari model he once built for Jason. A single envelope labeled Truth. The spotlight drifted toward it, glinting faintly. For a moment, it looked like sunlight through a windshield, familiar, alive. I smiled, exhaling slowly. Legacy wasn't marble or money. It was motion, and today it moved again. The bridge arched over the bay, glowing gold in the late afternoon sun. The red Ferrari rolled across it, steady and sure, its engine humming like a heartbeat that had finally found rhythm again. Jason was driving. The wind caught his hair the same way it once caught Robert's. I sat beside him, scarf fluttering, eyes tracing the endless blue. He said cars are like families. They run better when maintained. Jason smiled faintly. You think he'd be proud? I turned to him. He already was. The horizon stretched open, a line between sea and sky, past and future. The hum of the engine merged with the soft crash of waves below. Sunlight flickered through the bridge rails, painting stripes of gold across the dashboard. We didn't need words. The silence said enough. The camera pulled back. Just a red car gliding into light, small but certain, leaving 2 trails of brightness behind. Not an ending, a continuation. The engine rose, steady and pure, disappearing into the wind. The afternoon light softened into gold as I walked through the narrow path between marble stones. The air was still, touched only by the slow rhythm of my footsteps and the distant hum of wind through cypress leaves. Robert's name was carved deep into the granite, simple, unadorned, just the way he'd wanted it. I knelt down, brushing a few stray petals from the base of the headstone. The surface was cool beneath my palm. You built it for us. We kept it for you. I reached into my pocket and drew out the small silver key, the one that had turned every ignition, every memory, every journey. Its weight felt lighter now, as if it had fulfilled its purpose. I placed it gently on the stone, right beneath his name. The metal caught the sunlight, scattering a faint red reflection across the carved letters. For a moment, it looked as if the name glowed. A bird called from somewhere high above, then another answered. The sky was clear, endlessly blue, the same color it had been on the day we first met. I exhaled slowly, my voice barely a whisper. You can rest now, Robert. The engine runs fine. The wind moved across the cemetery, soft and respectful, carrying the sound of leaves brushing together, like applause for something finally finished. The garden behind the house shimmered with late afternoon light. I walked along the stone path Robert once laid, each step quiet but alive. The trees had grown taller, their branches thick and whispering. The wind threaded through them, turning the leaves into a slow-moving sea of green and gold. Everything moves, even grief. I stopped beneath the magnolia tree, its blossoms trembling in the breeze. Their scent was faint now, fading, but still there. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, breaking into patterns that danced across my hands. Time itself felt visible, flickering softly between shadow and shine. For the first time in months, the silence around me wasn't heavy. It was light, almost tender. I tilted my head back, closing my eyes. The wind brushed against my face like an old friend greeting me again, and when I opened my eyes, I smiled. The trees swayed gently, as if nodding in return. Somewhere beyond them, I could almost hear the low hum of an engine, steady, calm, eternal. The light was softer now, filtered through the narrow garage windows. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust, but also of calm. Jason bent over the dashboard, squinting at the old clock embedded between 2 dials. "How do you know all this?" he asked, half in awe, half in disbelief. "Because I watched," I said, my hand guiding his to the screw just below the frame. "Your father used to forget how small things hold everything together." He laughed quietly. "You really memorized all his ways." "I didn't memorize," I said. "I learned by watching." Observation is love without interruption. The light caught the chrome edges of the steering wheel, scattering golden lines across the walls. The rhythmic click of the clock echoed, delicate and alive. Jason tightened the final screw. I placed my hand over his. 2 generations, 1 motion, 1 sound. Outside, the sun sank lower, washing everything in amber. Inside, The last ray of light rested on the car's hood, on the symbol that had once carried grief, now glowing with something gentler. He looked at me. "It's done." The envelope was thin, yellowed at the corners. Robert's handwriting still precise and steady. Tom had found it tucked beneath the spare tire, wrapped in cloth. I unfolded it slowly, the paper trembling between my fingers. "If you ever feel lost, drive. The engine will remind you of your pulse. And if Jason's beside you, you've already won." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I wiped them, but they kept coming, not from pain, but from a deep, quiet knowing. He had written it years before, yet somehow knew exactly when I'd need it. I read it again, this time aloud, the air in the room vibrating with his voice through mine. "You've already won." Jason stood in the doorway, not saying anything. He didn't have to. The letter said everything that was left to say. I folded it back carefully and placed it in the glove compartment, next to the keychain engraved with his initials. Outside, the evening light dimmed. The car gleamed softly, as if listening. The wind pressed gently against the window, almost whispering, "Keep going." Morning mist hung low over the road as the red Ferrari glided forward, its reflection stretching long across the damp asphalt. Jason drove this time, the wheels steady beneath his hands. I sat beside him, window cracked open, air brushing past my face like memory returning in fragments. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering differently. The road wound through pines and fields, past the old gas station, the diner we used to stop at. The world outside felt both familiar and renewed, like someone had turned down the volume just enough for peace to speak. We reached the highway, the sun rose higher, painting the windshield gold. Jason smiled, eyes fixed ahead. "When the light changes," I whispered, "so do we." The sea appeared beyond the curve, vast, shining, endless. The same sea where I had thrown that small stone days ago. The same sound of waves, but lighter now, like forgiveness with no weight left. The camera pulled back slowly. Just a red car on an open road, wind tangled with piano notes, the world unfolding before it. The sky deepened into evening hues, the wind softened, the light turned molten, embracing everything in quiet warmth. As the horizon widened, I looked once more at my son, his hands sure, his face calm. Some stories end in silence. Ours keeps driving. The screen faded to white, then black. Whitmore Foundation for Truth appeared in simple serif letters. No music, only the sound of wind. 3 seconds of stillness, then a single heartbeat of engine echo, steady, eternal.